Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. India and Pakistan have reached a land and sea ceasefire effective from 1700 hours. US President Donald Trump confirmed the full and immediate ceasefire was agreed, with the US mediating talks with both countries amid days of increased tensions following the 22nd of April Pahalgam terror attack. European leaders Macron, Starmer, Merz and Tusk have held a meeting in Ukraine, vowing to ramp up pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin. He has met with Slovak Prime Minister Fico and praises his troops as the Kremlin mulls a ceasefire suggested by Donald Trump, who says, "Get this stupid war finished." The Kremlin says any ceasefire in Ukraine must include a halt to US and European arms supplies, warning otherwise Kyiv gains an unfair advantage. Russian spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Ukraine would use the pause to mobilise and reinforce the front line. Kim Jong-un has defended North Korea's involvement in the Russia-Ukraine war, calling it a sovereign right to defend a brother nation. He hails soldiers who participated in the Kursk operation as heroes and representatives of the nation's honour. Talks between China and the US have begun in Switzerland as the world's top two economies converse amid tit-for-tat tariff action. US President Donald Trump says an 80% tariff on Chinese imports seems right, down from the current 145% levies. Iran agrees to a fourth round of nuclear talks with the United States this Sunday in Oman, with Tehran saying negotiations are advancing. President Trump has warned he may strike Iran if no nuclear deal is reached amid regional tensions. Medical sources in Sudan say that 19 people have now died after a strike on a prison in North Kordofan. Meanwhile, another strike in the war-torn Darfur region reportedly kills at least 14 members of the same family, with a rescue group blaming paramilitary forces. The United States has confirmed a new Gaza aid system using private firms and armed contractors to deliver supplies as Israel's blockade hits 3 months. Israel will secure the perimeter but won't distribute aid, a plan UN agencies slam for weaponising humanitarian relief. India's Operation Sindoor's objective has been achieved. In a major breakthrough, India and Pakistan have officially agreed to a ceasefire with immediate effect, marking the end of a tense period of heightened cross-border action. The agreement follows direct talks between the Directors General of military operations from both sides. Let's listen in to the Foreign Secretary of India, Vikram Misri.
Called the Director General of Military Operations of India at 15:35 hours earlier this afternoon. It was agreed between them that both sides would stop all firing and military action on land and in the air and sea with effect from 1700 hours Indian Standard Time today. Instructions have been given on both sides to give effect to this understanding. The Directors General of Military Operations will talk again on the 12th of May at 1200 hours.
Well, the ceasefire, effective from 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time today, covers land, air and sea operations. Pakistan initiated the call that led to this understanding, but sources confirm there is no plan to hold talks on other issues for now. The Indian Army claims that it has successfully avenged the Pahalgam attack, which killed 26 people, with 7 strategic objectives completed under Operation Sindoor. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar has confirmed the ceasefire on social media, asserting that Islamabad remains committed to peace, but without compromising sovereignty. The United States has also welcomed the development, praising the leadership of both prime ministers for choosing dialogue over escalation. Further military talks are scheduled for May the 12th as both sides work to stabilise the situation. This situation, of course, has been tense over recent days, with provocations continuing from Pakistan and swift countermeasures, proportionate countermeasures from India. Of course, nights of action along the line of control and international border have now been met with this announcement, of course, first from Donald Trump and then being confirmed by both Pakistan and India. Those people living in Jammu, Kashmir, Punjab, other areas across the border and line of control, of course, have been living in moments of uncertainty with blackouts in place across certain areas, also different measures as well impacting normal living. This news comes amid calls from many world leaders, diplomatic efforts from nations including Iran, Saudi Arabia and others calling for de-escalation. And we have the Truth Social post here from Donald Trump, just confirming that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full, immediate ceasefire. That came into effect at 1700 hours Indian Standard Time. That is a land and sea ceasefire. Well, joining us now is Megha Sharma, Executive Editor with NewsX, to bring us some more information on this breaking development. Megha, what can you tell us?
All right, so we've all heard it. It is a ceasefire that has been declared between India and Pakistan on land, in the air and at sea. That has been a ceasefire that India has said has been negotiated between the two countries, India and Pakistan, that had been conflicting for the last several days. India has refuted that there was no interference of any third party or any third country, as has been the claim that has been made by the United States of America, US President Donald Trump and the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. India has also mentioned in that brief 40-second press briefing, perhaps one of the shortest press briefings of the Minister of External Affairs of India in the history, that the ceasefire was negotiated after a phone call was made by the Pakistan Director General Military Operations to the Indian counterpart, and there were no preconditions that were laid for the ceasefire. And as of 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time, there is no firing. Firing and military operations have been stopped on land, at sea and in air. So that's the brief that we have gotten from the Ministry of External Affairs of India. We also know that as per the Ministry of External Affairs sources, that there are going to be economic, financial, diplomatic and trade sanctions that India will continue to impose on Pakistan. These sanctions, of course, include the Indus Water Treaty that has been put in abeyance unconditionally, and there has also been the downgrading of diplomatic relations, where the diplomatic staff of Pakistan from India has been removed from Indian territory, and something similar had been replicated by Pakistan for the Indian diplomats serving in Pakistan. There has also been no change that is going to happen with regards to Pakistani nationals seeking visas into the country, whether they are visitor visas, tourist visas, visas on medical grounds, or visas for SAARC nations treaty that had been signed amongst the SAARC nations, which India and Pakistan are members of. It is also important to note that the next set of talks that are going to happen between India and Pakistan are going to happen on May 12th, as has been announced by the Foreign Secretary of India. These talks are going to happen 12 p.m. Indian Standard Time on May 12th, and again, this is a talk These are talks that are going to happen over a phone call. There is no physical meeting that is going to be held, and it is going to be the Director General of military operations of Pakistan who is going to once again be calling the Indian counterpart to discuss further what is going to be the next steps that are going to be followed by India and Pakistan. So that in terms of what has happened in a span of about an hour and a half, and that concludes the 4-day-long conflict that we had been witnessing since May 7th. It was becoming more and more escalatory and provocative, with retaliation coming in from India. But this, as things stand, is has been resolved temporarily, at least, with ceasefire being adhered to by both countries, by the armed forces of both the nations, 5 p.m. local time onwards.
Yes, Megha, before we let you go, I want to look at the US involvement in this ceasefire that's been announced. Of course, just a couple of days ago, JD Vance said that the India-Pakistan dispute was none of our business, but Marco Rubio has confirmed that he and JD Vance were involved in these discussions. How significant is this US involvement, and what do you think turned the tide after JD Vance's initial comments?
Yes, that's exactly because we're hearing contradictory statements. While even before the Ministry of External Affairs, the government of India, through its External Affairs Ministry, made the announcement that there is a ceasefire that has been adhered to by both India and Pakistan. There was just a few minutes ago a post that had been posted by US President Donald Trump on Truth Social, his social media account, saying that he had been able to mediate between India and Pakistan to ensure a ceasefire was, there was a ceasefire that both countries adhered to. Like I said, a contradictory statement has come from the Indian side. Indian side says that this ceasefire has been negotiated between India and Pakistan. There is no third country's involvement that India would give credit to. So that's the statement. That's the line that India is carrying forward with. In fact, there were Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State of United States of America, also said that it was a peace deal, a ceasefire deal that was brokered by JD Vance and Marco Rubio between India and Pakistan. And he further went a step ahead and said that both countries have even decided to actually sit down for further talks in the issue, on the issue at a neutral site, on a neutral ground. But the Indian government, the Ministry of External Affairs, has refuted any of these possibilities. They have said it is impossible that India comes and sits across the table with Pakistan for any talks, whether in India or Pakistan or any neutral ground. So that's where things stand at.
Megha Sharma, thank you very much for joining us. We move now to Major General Anuj Matta, who is a defence expert. Major General, thank you for being here with us after this announcement. I'd like to first get your reaction to that.
Thank you very much for getting me over. The thing is, this was expected because you know why? Because there was an attempt made by the Pakistani the political leadership, and they were wanting this thing to end. Because I tell you what, that the conventional warfare and the escalation in this regard was causing a great damage to their economy, and also they were subjected to severe military pressure during the last couple of days, whatever. So this was brokered between the DGMOs of the two nations. The DGMO of Pakistan Armed Forces had spoken to the DGMO. DGMO is the Director General of Military Operations of the Indian Army. And to my mind, this is a great thing to have happened. India has used all drivers of the comprehensive national power to drive home the issue that any act of terrorism will not be acceptable to the country on their soil. Kashmir is a sovereign Indian turf, and an act of terrorism on that is not acceptable at all. So every possible driver of the comprehensive national power was used to pressurize the Pakistan leadership and Pakistan armed forces, and fortunately it has come to a ceasefire. There are many issues related to it, and there has to be an assurance from the other side to effect, not only assurance, they have to say that there will be no terrorist incidents on the Indian soil hereafter, and they have to ensure it. So my initial impression is it's a application of drivers of comprehensive national power to get things done at somebody's terms. Yep.
Yes, we have some more information coming in now following the announcement of this ceasefire, and Pakistan has fully reopened its airspace following the ceasefire agreement with India. The announcement came shortly after US President Donald Trump confirmed the ceasefire between the two neighbouring nations. The Pakistan Airports Authority has confirmed that all flight operations, both domestic and international, can now resume as normal. This seen as a significant step towards de-escalation after days of heightened tensions. Of course, we will continue to bring you all of the latest updates in the aftermath of this ceasefire announcement. I want to thank Major General Anuj Matta for joining us during this discussion. Also, thank you to Megha Sharma. Further world leaders' reactions will be coming in, and we will bring you all of those as they happen, as the fallout following the devastating Pahalgam terror attack, at least for now, has reached a ceasefire after days of escalating tensions. The leaders of France, Britain, Germany and Poland agreed on Saturday to call on Russia to accept a 30-day unconditional ceasefire starting on Monday, Kyiv have said. The proposal came after the four leaders, part of an alliance Britain and France call the Coalition of the Willing, met President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. French President Emmanuel Macron has warned that Russia would face massive coordinated European and US sanctions if it broke a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine proposed by Kyiv's Western allies. This sentiment was earlier echoed by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. She had said on social media platform X that a ceasefire in Ukraine must be implemented without preconditions, and warned that Moscow would face more sanctions if it breached it. Macron has also said that the United States has committed to monitor a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine proposed by Kyiv's European allies, and that the truce would pave the way for immediate work and negotiations on parties involved to build a robust and lasting peace. This came after the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the leaders of France, Britain, Germany and Poland reportedly held phone talks with US President Donald Trump after their meeting in Kyiv. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has also said that there was absolute unity between Kyiv's allies for the proposed 30-day ceasefire with Russia. Meanwhile, Russia has shown no signs of halting its 3-year invasion of Ukraine and rejected a similar proposal put forward by the United States and Kyiv in March. Moreover, Moscow warned earlier there could be no truce unless the West halted arms deliveries to Kyiv. Let's take a look at what the EU leaders have said.
Und deshalb möchte ich Ihnen gerne sagen, dass wir heute mit unserer Präsenz hier ein sehr klares und sehr deutliches Signal geben. Das Signal, dass wir entschlossen sind, alles zu tun, um diesen Krieg so schnell wie möglich zu beenden. Informiert, und wir sind dankbar, dass der amerikanische Präsident voll und ganz unsere Initiative unterstützt, sie teilt und sie mit uns auch gemeinsam ergreift. Wir arbeiten gemeinsam darauf hin, dass Russland sich endlich auf einen längeren Waffenstillstand einlässt, statt immer wieder neue Vorbedingungen zu stellen.
En cas de violation de ce cessez-le-feu, nous sommes agrés que des sanctions massives seraient préparées et coordonnées entre Européens et Américains. Condition préalable à ce cessez-le-feu, ni de la part des Ukrainiens ni de la part des Russes, qui a vocation à durer 30 jours sur terre, dans les airs et en mer, avec une surveillance assurée principalement par les États-Unis d'Amérique et auxquels tous les Européens qui y sont prêts contribueront.
The position we've now got to today is absolute unity across a whole range of countries around the world, including the United States, that there must be that 30-day unconditional ceasefire. That is the greatest unity on this point we have ever had, pulling different countries together. Clear, absolutely, there must be an unconditional ceasefire for 30 days. Clear that that means it must be without condition.
Well, we move from Kyiv now to Switzerland, and Chinese Vice Premier He Lipeng resumed talks with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Saturday afternoon in Geneva in a tentative first step towards diffusing a trade war that is disrupting the global economy. They had met earlier in the morning for 2 hours of discussions where Bessent and Li Fend discussed the growing tensions in which duties on goods imports between the world's two largest economies have soared far beyond 100%. Washington is seeking to reduce its trade deficit with Beijing and convince China to renounce what the United States says is a mercantilist economic model and contribute more to global consumption, a shift that would require politically sensitive domestic reforms. Earlier yesterday, US President Donald Trump said on his Truth Social handle that an 80% tariff on Chinese goods seems right, suggesting for the first time a specific alternative to the 145% levies he has imposed on Chinese imports. Well, joining us to discuss these ongoing talks and their ramifications is Andrew K.P. Leung, a China strategist, joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you for joining us on NewsX World once again. Let's take our thoughts back now to these tit-for-tat tariffs and this conversation which could be light at the end of the tunnel. How do you think these conversations will go? And do you think it will see an immediate de-escalation in the tit-for-tat tariffs that are now standing at over 100% on both nations?
Well, in any major conflict between global powers, it's the question of power dynamics. As you can see that the President Trump and his team has hyped up the tariffs over the past couple of months, from maybe 50% to over 245%. Now, even if you increase the tariffs to over 50%, no trade is really possible. Any higher numbers is just a matter of arithmetic, with very little real meaning in reality. And of course, the Chinese government has never given up in resisting and in balancing or counteracting these tariffs. It's not just at the moment, because the Trump tariffs were somehow anticipated by President Xi even during Trump's first term. Because even during his first term, President Xi has ordered the entire nation to prepare for unprecedented changes not seen in 100 years, pivoting towards services instead of exports and internal consumption, also pivoting the trade towards the global south, and on technology, putting a lot of emphasis on self-reliance and technological progress. And of course, it has this kind of prescience has been bearing fruit on the technology side, witnessed the deep seek phenomenon. And of course, the technology is not just DeepSeek, the successful operation of China's own built space station, several important missions accomplished. And above all, if you look at the total export, in fact, it has surged even during the past 2 months. Of course, the export to the United States has declined drastically. It's more than compensated to the export to the rest of the world, partly because the rest of the world is anticipated this tariffs dislocation is stocking up on a lot of products from China. This again highlights China's bargaining chip in being the centrality, the central to the whole world supply and value chain, in the sense that most of the products, household products, if you go to any supermarket in the United States, you'll find that a great deal of products, the large majority proportion of them are made in China, even though they're not marked made in China. China's been embedded in it in terms of rare earths, materials, parts and components, and also logistics, because the world's top 7 container ports out of the top 11 are located in China. And of course, a lot of operations are outside China, but it's still controlled or dominated by China's supply chain. And that's a very, very powerful bargaining chip. And of course, President Trump is facing a lot of headwinds internally. There have been protests by a lot of American citizens against empty shells, against rising prices, against, of course, growing inequality. And above all, more recently, states like the state of California, which is all for open trade, has launched a great deal of protests in terms of the Constitution, and they are already starting a legal battle towards independence in the legislature. Of course, this is early days yet, but it also shows that there is a lot of headwinds inside the United States against what is perceived the Trump's iconoclastic destruction of the world liberal order, apart from the loss of his moral and leadership in terms of human rights and a free so-called liberal world order, replacing it by rules of the jungle, unilateral coercion. So I think that bearing in mind all these dynamics, I for one had always been more optimistic that some sort of accommodation has got to be reached sooner rather than later, particularly in the light of President Trump's imposition of a 90-day pause, so that...
Yes, Andrew, I apologise to have to cut you off. We are unfortunately out of time, but thank you very much for joining us and providing your insight. We will be across these developing conversations in Geneva and the rest of the breaking news from across the world very soon.